Sadashiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Ishvaro Guranmeti Murti Veda Vivagine Vyomavad Vyapta Deyaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Sarva Vedanta Siddhanta Gocharam Tamagocharam Govindam Paramanandam Sadguru Pranatosmyam Om Sri Krishna Govinda Narayana. There's this argument in the spiritual world. Maybe you haven't heard it. Maybe it's not even relevant to you, but it helps us to understand the relationship between duality and non-duality. Because there's this argument in the spiritual world. It's been around for a long time, and it's you can see it most clearly in the Krishna consciousness. I don't know if you've heard of the Krishna consciousness people. They're Vedikas, but they're dualists. Vedikas means they're from the Vedic tradition, and their argument is they're all experiential. They're dualists, and their argument is, why would I want to be Krishna? Krishna being a sense, be the self. Why would I want to be the self when I can experience the self? Because their idea is that when you're experiencing this, when you are the self, you're not experiencing the self. That the self is an object to be enjoyed, and so they want to experience. They chant the name of Krishna, and they experience the bliss from the chanting, and they say that's the experience of Krishna. And they don't like Vedanta people at all. In fact, they're very contemptuous of us, even though we're from the same tradition. And they call us Mayawadis. Mayawadi means a follower of Maya, of Shankara. They hate Shankara, they hate the whole Maya concept whatsoever. Because Maya, if you understand Maya, then you can easily gain non-dual knowledge, non-dual devotion. And they believe that the jiva and the self are eternally separate. So there's no way you could become Krishna, become the self. There's no way you could become the self. You always remain as an eternal individual, separate from the Supreme Person. They call it in their literature, they call it the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna's in Vaikuntha or Goloka. They have certain names for it. And we're always here, but we can experience Krishna by invoking Krishna's name. Because when you say the name of somebody, that person, this is their argument. If I say, Sally, hey, Sally, only Sally is going to respond if they're in a group of people, isn't it? Nobody else will turn their head. Why? Because it's not their name. So their argument is if you say Krishna's name or Rama's name, then you'll get Krishna or Rama to pay attention to you, and that will make you feel good. And so you should chant Krishna's or Rama's name all the time to keep the Lord looking at you and giving you the blessings. That's the argument. And so if you become one with Krishna, then you're going to miss out on that wonderful experience of Krishna. That's their argument. See how crazy people become. Now, why is that not true? I mean, it sounds all logical, doesn't it? But does it? And we say you can be Krishna, be the self, and experience the self at the same time. In other words, how does that work? That works because duality and non-duality, the self and the world, are not different. They're not different, but they're not the same either. In other words, they're in two different orders of the same reality. So duality doesn't contradict non-duality at all, because duality is in the order of what? Mithya order of reality. It exists, but it's not real. And you're already experiencing God or Krishna or the self. Why? Because God or Krishna, you're already experiencing it. You have no choice about experiencing it. Why? Because it's your very existence. Is there anybody not experience existing right now? Is it not? No, nobody is not experiencing existence now, are they? Well, maybe you are, because nobody's responding. No, you always are. Isn't that right? And you love your existence more than anything, isn't it? We have covered this point. Why? Because you all want to live another day. If existing wasn't the most valuable experience to you, you wouldn't care if you lived or died, would you? Would you? No, you wouldn't. Right? You'd be happy to die tomorrow, but who's happy to die tomorrow? Everybody wants to die tomorrow or after the class. You can wait till after the class. Who wants to die right after the class? Al's provoking me. Nobody. Which goes to show that just being is the most valuable experience you have. So you're never not experiencing yourself, are you? Tell me when you're not experiencing yourself. Yeah, nobody has an answer, because everybody knows they're always experiencing themselves alone, isn't it? Think about it. I understand this is a kind of tricky little point, isn't it? So if that's true, if you're always experiencing yourself, and there is an experience of an object, and we know there are experiences of objects also, don't we? Because that's what life is. So there's no question that you can experience joy in objects. So there's no question about that, because we do it all the time. So I'm always experiencing myself all the time, and I'm capable of experiencing the joy in objects while I exist, as I exist, aren't I? So that means what? When you're experiencing happiness in a relationship with some object. Do you cease to exist when you're having that? And then you have a special experience called, which is different from the experience you always have. Do you cease to exist and have a special experience then? No, you don't. Your existence continues. You keep existing and experiencing your own existence while at the same time you're experiencing objects, isn't it right? Because there's no contradiction. See, the problem, we think that because of the language, we think duality and non-duality are opposites. We think that if it's day, it's not night. If it's good, it's not bad. If it's dual, it's not non-dual. That's how our intellects are conditioned to think, because we've been living, we've been unaware of ourself for so long that we're conditioned to think in terms of either or. If it's like this, it's not like that. If you love me, you don't. If you love me, you can't hate me. But haven't you had love-hate relationships? Can't you love somebody and hate them at the same time? Yeah, you can, can't you? So they're not actually opposites, because the you that's there, supersedes the love and the hate. So there are seemingly two different yous. There's an experiencing you, and there's an observing, existent, eternal you. Right? So worshiping God, like I love these symbols here. And I talk to Krishna all the time. Does that mean I'm a dualist? No. I'm adding a little bit of additional enjoyment to the enjoyment of my existence. I'm always enjoying my existence. That's the bedrock. But what? By worshiping God, by worshiping the self, I add a little bit of spice to the soup. Make it a little interesting. Understand? So you can be the self and experience the self. So you are the self and you're experiencing the self at the same time. So there's the reason now. Why do these people have this argument? Because they believe, dualists believe in the yoga philosophy that you need to get rid of your ego, your experiencing entity, to become the self. And that's based on a false notion of creation. Okay? Maya. Maya is the creator. Ishvara or Maya is the creator. There's two kinds of changes that can take place. The change is called a parinama. A parinama is a simple change. One thing changes into another thing. For instance, milk, when you stir it, becomes butter. Doesn't it? Or cheese. You can take milk. You get cheese. Cheese is milk in a form, isn't it? Now, when you take milk and you turn it into cheese, is any milk left? Is there any milk left? No, there isn't, is there? The milk has ceased to exist. The milk has to cease to exist to become cheese. Now, does God have to cease to exist to become the world? Because if God existed, and cheese existed, then there should be a way to get back to God by reversing the process, isn't it? I should be able to take the cheese and re-engineer it backwards and get the milk again. But I can't do that, can I? Why? Because the milk never became the cheese. Did it? Huh? Huh? Did it? The milk never became the cheese. What did it? This is called a Vivarta Parinama. A Vivarta Parinama, there's a technical word that's added to that, means milk appeared as cheese. The milk didn't disappear. There was some power that made it look like cheese. Did the wood disappear to become the chair? You say it's a chair. Why do you say it's a chair?
Looks like.
Huh? Yeah, it looks like a chair. It seems to be a chair. So if I say, what is this? You don't say wood, do you? You say it's a chair. Well, why do you ignore the chair? Why don't you say it's a chair? It's wood. Why don't you say that? Why are you ignoring the substance and looking at the form, the name and the form? If there's a form, the wood is in a particular form, and that form is called a chair. So what is Maya adding to consciousness? A name and a form. But consciousness is not disappearing. The wood doesn't have to go to become a chair, does it? Because we can take the chair apart and make a table out of it. It's still got the same wood, but now it's in a different form. So this person that I am is this jiva, this non-eternal jiva that I am, isn't non-existent. It doesn't have to go away. You don't have to get rid of your person. Understand? See, this is why they're afraid to become Krishna, because they think they're going to cease being people. And nobody wants to cease being a person. We've already proven that, haven't we? Because everybody wants to live another day. Because being here and being a person is a wonderful thing. Life is a wonderful thing, because I get to experience my existence, and I get to experience objects at the same time. And the existence itself is beautiful because its nature is sundaram, beauty, and its nature is bliss, anandam, and its nature is consciousness. I love being conscious and aware. And its nature is sat, existence. So understanding who I am, in other words, claiming my identity as awareness, I got the best of both all possible worlds, don't I? I get to have my cake and eat it too. Huh? How cool is that? Whereas if you believe in the Dvaita philosophy, in other words, the dualistic philosophy, to become one, you have to cease being two. But one and two are not opposites, are they? That's why we don't call the self one. Well, we do use the word one in certain contexts, but we call the self not two. Now, why don't we just say the self is one? Why don't we like that terminology? Because the letter one implies two, doesn't it? So there's an implied meaning. If you say one, you imply other numbers. You imply 2 or 3 or 5 or whatever it is, because all the other numbers start from 1, isn't it? So we say the self, don't say the self is one, we say it's not two. Huh? And that takes care of that philosophical problem of non-duality. It's something that is not objective, but it's something that's always present and always experienced. But unfortunately, what? It's not always known. So what's the solution to having my cake and eating it too? What's the solution? Knowing who I am and claiming what? That as my primary identity. My secondary or dualistic identity doesn't have to go away. Because non-duality awareness includes duality, all objects. The subject and object, if there's a world of subjects and objects, and we know there is because we experience it, you can't experience something that doesn't exist, then I include all transactions, all communications between a subject and object. And Dvaita Bhakti is beautiful. It's a valid, relevant, and intelligent use of my what? Of my free will to worship God in a form. Understand? Because the bhaktas are right, the dualists are right. If you're thinking of Krishna, if you're thinking of yourself all the time, you get the bliss of consciousness simply by thinking about it, and allowing those thoughts to generate the emotion of love. There's nothing wrong with the emotion of love at all. That's beautiful. What? Because it's just an embellishment, of a vibhuti, or an embellishment on what? On your non-dual nature. So there's no conflict here between Dvaitam and Advaitam, between duality and non-duality. Owing to the fact that what? Maya generates the appearance of duality. And you experience appearances, but you know they're not real, isn't that right? Like, for instance, a movie or a dream. You have a dream, and when you wake up, you know it's not real, isn't that right? But that doesn't mean you didn't experience it, does it? Well, you experienced it, but then when you wake up, you know it's not real. So you do experience things that aren't real, and the world is not real. It means it's not the self, it's not permanent. But that doesn't mean it isn't a source of great joy if what? If you know it's just you appearing as something else. So when I see you, I know that you're me. And since I love me 100%, me meaning my existence, I see the existence in you, and I understand that the existence in you is non-different from my existence, that the consciousness in you is non-different from my consciousness, and that the love in me is non-different from the love in you. What do? I love you as me. Nice, huh? Problem solved. Because what's the samsara problem? Transacting with something other than you, trying to get two things with different natures to stay in contact all the time. Which is what relationships are about. This is the argument in relationship, isn't it? You don't love me. The argument is, you don't love me. And then, of course, the person has reasons why, so forth and so on. Well, yeah, they do love you, but they don't love you. Huh? They love you when they love you, and they don't love you when they don't love you. Why? Because that love is what? Conditioned by the knowledge that I'm only an experiencing entity, an experiencer of objects, not that I'm what? I am love itself. Yes, Al.
Isn't Krishna on the level of the causal body?
No, Krishna is a symbol for the self. In fact, the word Krishna means that which is the most attractive thing. That's what Krishna means. What's the most attractive thing?
Self.
Yourself, right? Huh? Don't you love yourself more than anything? Why do you love yourself more than anything? Because it's the most attractive thing. So Krishna is just a name for the self. Ram, my spiritual name, Ram is just a name for the self. Ram means Atma Ram. It means the one that's enjoying in the hearts of all beings. Not just in James's heart, but that being that's enjoying or reveling or dancing or playing in everybody's heart. That's called Ram. That's the same as Krishna. That means love. That means I'm love, you're love. And a self-realized person sees you as love. In other words, when you fall in love with somebody, you don't fall in love with the person, you fall in love with love. But you think you're falling in love with the person and you need that person to give you that feeling of love, but you don't. Because you got that feeling of love. You are that very feeling of love with yourself all the time. If you recognize that feeling of love in someone else, you couldn't recognize it if you didn't have it in yourself, could you? How would you recognize it? Yeah. Understand? So self-knowledge, Vedanta, solves the problem of experience and knowledge. You get to experience and you get to know, and it's the knowledge that gives you that permanent, appreciation of love. Understand? Of yourself as love.
Because the Krishna consciousness people, they don't have the immortality benefit, for instance.
They don't have the immortality benefit, but they claim the immortality benefit for the wrong reason. Why? Because they claim that the jiva is eternal.
Oh.
But they say it's eternally separate from Krishna.
What?
Now think about that. What's wrong with that? That would mean there's two eternities, wouldn't it? There's a Krishna eternity, and there's a self eternity, and then there's a jiva eternity. Is that correct?
Yeah.
But do they have?
No, it's not correct, is it? There aren't two eternities. If there are two different types of eternity, then which one's real? Huh? It's just like, now, when you're in a dream, the dream seems real. When you're in the waking state, you take the what? You take the waking state to be real, isn't it? Now, which is real? The waking state or the dream state? Which one?
No.
Now, using this analogy, doesn't hold up completely, because the waking state, which is a symbol in this example of the self, that is always present. So that is real. The self is real because there is no other eternity, there is no other existence, there is no other consciousness. If there were some other existence or a consciousness, or there were a different eternal reality, then we'd have words for it, wouldn't we? that was experiential and known, we'd have word for it. But nobody. But there's never. Do you ever see? You ever read about eternity 1 and eternity 2 and eternity 3 and eternity 4, and all the different eternities? Do you ever heard of that? No, you haven't, because there isn't such a thing. If there was, there'd be a word for it, there'd be a name for it, and a form for it, huh? And it would be experiential. But it's not. There's only one eternity. There's only one self. There's only one consciousness. There's only one what? Existence. There's only one love. Yeah, German.
James, so the concept that the Krishna people have, so do they actually see Krishna as Atma or as self?
No. They see the jiva as a self,
Okay.
and Krishna as a different self. Krishna as the self in everything, the self as beyond everything. They have him in the transcendental sky. They have words for it, and that you have to go to that place to experience it. It's just like all dualists.
Yes.
They have a heaven.
It's just like the Christian church.
It's just
Because
like
also
the Christian
eternal
church.
soul.
They're the dualists of the Vedic tradition.
Yeah.
They're Vedikas. They follow Vedika Dharma. That's the interesting thing about it. They eat sattvic, they live sattvic, they do all of these, they're constantly engaged in ritual worship. They're constantly chanting Krishna's name. And they follow Dharma. They don't break the rules. They observe all the holidays of gods and so forth and so on. They're definitely Vedikas, but what? But they're afraid of losing their individuality. But you don't physically or experientially lose your individuality when you realize who you are. You continue on as a human being. That's what he's talking about here, about a non-dual bhakta. A non-dual bhakta is a person. What your view is what? When you get enlightened, suddenly everything just changes and you're a different person from that time on? This is what people think. That the gaining the knowledge of who you are is going to have huge benefits for the person. That the person is going to be completely different. This has happened several times in my experience over the years. It's always men, usually men. And that they're often wealthy men. And they invest all their money in spirituality. They've got an inheritance, or they made a bunch of money in business or something, and then they have the leisure, so they sell their businesses or live off their trust fund people or something, and then they get involved in the spirituality, and they spend all their money. In fact, that's what happened to me. I had a lot of money. But when the time I realized who I was, I had 21 cents in my pocket. I arrived in San Francisco with 21 cents, and I reached in my pocket. I had a phone number. In those days, you could make a phone call for a dime in a public thing. I reached in my pocket, and the one of the dimes fell out of my pocket and it went down a manhole cover and I couldn't get it. So I only had 11 cents left. And I put the dime in the phone and I called a number of a guy I'd met 2 years before in Morocco. So who gave me a San Francisco number. So I had a penny, Now, and I was and am enlightened as anybody is, because everybody gets the same enlightenment. But I ended up, what did I end up doing? sleeping on a floor in a hallway with the mice running over my feet, just on the floor with just a blanket my friend gave me and a little pillow, and driving around in an old car which he gave me also, breaking into abandoned buildings and diving into dumpsters and picking up junk, trash, and selling it at the flea market. Now, shouldn't there have been, as soon as I got my moksha, shouldn't a limousine have driven up? Huh? And with a beautiful woman inside, and a big bag of money, huh? We shouldn't, huh? Because I'm the self. I'm incredible. I'm the most wonderful thing there is. I'm the source of the whole universe, huh? Well, why didn't that happen? So anyway, one of these guys, he had been very successful, and he spent all his money, and then he sold all his property. And of course, then the wife left, because she's getting nervous when he's lost all his money, but at least they still had the house. But then he sold the house out from under her, so then she left, and she took the daughter with her. So now he'd lost everything, but he's happy because he's realized the self. And he's telling me about his tragedies, and he thinks that people are listening to me because I'm the self. Huh? He thinks because I'm self-realized, all these people are listening to me, huh? And the beautiful women are all smiling at me and, come hither. And they're putting money in the donation box, and I'm jetting around the world, huh? And seem to be always smiling. So he figured, yeah, that's right. And he figures what? He figures it's because I'm the self, and I know who I am that's happening. So he wants me to teach him how to what? To teach Vedanta. I said, no, wait, what? And in the meantime, he's living on the dole from the government, and then the dole runs out. He can no longer get any money from the government, so he's just about on the street. And he calls me up, and I said, just get a job at McDonald's or someplace. Okay, so it's $8 an hour, and so you're used to having millions, but just being the self, it doesn't change anything. If you're going to make Vidya work, you got to do the work in Vidya. You think I'm because I'm the self that you're sitting here? That's not the reason. It's because I worked my butt off doing this all the time, and I learned how to communicate it, and I wrote all these books and did all these talks and here and there and everywhere, and I'm just a professional Vedanta person, that's all. I put in my 30,000 hours. That's the only reason it's good. It's not because I'm some special spiritual being. James is just James. That's what he liked to do. This is my worship of God. And since I love God totally, I'm totally surrendered to God, I only think about God and talk about God and work for God's glory 24/7. So the Vidya world and the Satya world are what? Are in two different dimensions. And the key to freedom is and non-dual love is understanding that. I know last night, and it's always the case, when I tell you that you have to accept your ugly bits, you have to accept the ugly parts of yourself, I notice people just go, they don't like it. They can't accept their own selfishness, their own violence, their own manipulations, their own weaknesses. They can't accept that. You have to accept it. You have to love it. Or you're not going to be free. You're always going to what? Your happiness is always going to be held hostage to the absence of Vidya, of imperfection. And it's the reason you want to be perfect as a jiva. Why? Because you are perfect as a self. And you're superimposing that perfection that you are onto the jiva. Superimposition is the problem. You know at some part inside you that you are perfect. And you want that jiva person to be perfect. And the jiva person's never going to be perfect. People tell me, I got my enemies. Not many. I have a few enemies. Most everybody likes me, but I've got my enemies. And my enemies tell me, what do they tell me? You need a lot of work, James. You need to clean up your act. You criticize other teachings, and you expose the weaknesses of other teachers. You're a bad person. You need a lot of work.
Tell new stories.
Huh?
Tell new stories.
Yeah, tell new stories. Yeah, you need new stories. My wife tells me you need new stories. You got some new stories, tell them, and I'll tell those stories, but I'm too busy to figure out new stories. And you know what? This is a joke, but you know what I say? I say, well, you're right. I am a mess. Nobody knows what a mess I am more than I do, because I have to live with the selfish, ugly person that I am. I know that, but it's a little late in the day for me to remove all those awful deep problems that I have, because I may die tomorrow, and if I die tomorrow, then all my efforts will have been wasted. I won't get the result, because I'll be dead. So all my karmas will be burned up, and I won't do that. So I've come to the conclusion that the best way to do is just love myself as I am, 100%, and leave it at that. And if you don't like it, too bad. There's no connection. I know this is the hardest teaching. I always get emails after I make this statement in every or arguments when I make this statement. There's no connection between the self and Maya and the world. If there's any connection, then what? Then freedom's not possible, because what? Maya's going to rub off of the imperfection of Maya, the changing nature of Maya is going to cause the self to change, isn't it? If the self changes, there's no hope, is there? If the self is changing, you're never the same person from one moment to the next, are you? Huh? Because every minute that something happens to you, you're a different person. You've lost something and you've gained something else. And so if this continual process of change goes on and on and on and on, there's no way to connect, there's no way to know who you were before. Is there? There's no way to know. And in fact, that's what people often think. I often think, I'm completely different from what I was like 10 years ago. They look at themselves and they say, gee, that's not the same person. Well, it isn't the same person. Why? Because the subtle body isn't the same. Because the subtle body is impacted by what happens, and it does change from moment to moment. But you wouldn't understand, you wouldn't appreciate the difference that you are today from what you were 10 years ago if you weren't the self, would you? And you do know what you were then, and you do know what you are now, because there's some factor that is unaffected by what happens that just is the knowing principle. It just gives you just the knowledge. So you're free when you're in duality, or when duality's in you. It's a better way to say it. When duality's happening, you are non-dual always. So that's the argument. So you can be God and experience God. There's no contradiction. See how smart we are? This is how you have your cake and eat it too. Okay. Okay, here. Now, this is where we left off yesterday. I think verse 23. Isn't that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Verse 23. If you forget that every object, and remember I said we're just for the sake of this this seminar, we're calling, when the word object sub to word persons, people, because this is about helping your relationships with everybody, right? This is about healing your relationships with the world. That's if all your relationships are love relationships, if you love your boss like you love yourself, you won't have work problems. Yeah. And if you love your boyfriend like you love yourself, you won't have relationship problems. You love your children like you love yourself, you'll take care of your children. You'll love your children. You won't stick them in front of the TV and give them all these devices and tell them that you care for them and you're working hard to ensure their future. You'll actually spend time loving your children and being with them. You'll be a hands-on parent rather than a hands-off parent. So this love issue is the real issue. Marianne Williamson, she was running for president. She's dropped out of the race. That was her argument. It's very interesting that argument actually even got into the national dialogue about society and its problems. She was the one who wrote, she was a famous spiritual person. Yeah, I don't know if you heard of her, Marianne Williamson. She came up, she was spiritual for a long time, and she basically got very famous by popularizing what was that? Course in Miracles. The Course in Miracles is sometimes called Christian Vedanta. Yeah, it has a kind of non-dual message to it, but it's so hopelessly confusing. It's a channeled information. It's full of psychological language and religious language and really peculiar, difficult. I often thought I should rewrite it, but she made it understandable to a normal person. And she said, the basic problem that we have in these societies is a spiritual problem. And then she's right. The spiritual problem means a values issue. And nobody, of course, wants to deal with their values. We're going to get to that, the values topic. And what you value depends upon who you are and what your vasanas are. So it says here, what does it say? If you forget that everybody, every person is consciousness, that is yourself, only selfish passion remains. Right? In other words, then it's what can you do for me? Isn't it? Then you only look at people in terms of what they can do for you. You don't think, like John Kennedy said, you don't think, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. That was the last time you heard that idea. That was like, what, 60 years ago or 70 years ago? You don't hear that anymore, huh? No way. Well, that's exactly what we're saying here. If you leave the self out of it, if you leave love out of it, then people are only there for you. Then your relationships is all about only getting what you want from people. Yeah, now look, be honest. See if that isn't why you're with the person. See if it isn't basically a selfish relationship. It isn't just all about your feelings of what you want. Of course, you pretend, and you say in your words, you say, "Oh, I'm doing this all for you." But are you really? Are you really putting their needs before your needs? Because that's what a cultivated person does. That's what a classy, dharmic, cultivated person does. In every situation, they don't think what they can get out of it. They try to figure out what they can do to help you. And if there's anything comes out of it, personally comes out of it, they can take it as prasad because it wasn't solicited. But when you go into it with this calculation, I need to know this person and I need to do this because I've got this particular desire, and you're all smarmy and smiley and schmoozy, huh? And because you want something. Are you helping yourself or the world? No, you're not. You're cheating them out of the opportunity of enjoying your love, and you're cheating yourself out of the opportunity of growing spiritually. Because you only grow spiritually when you're what? When you're giving. The heart that gives gathers. It's a beautiful statement by one of our poets, Robert Frost. He wrote a poem. And he said, the heart that gives gathers. Now, normally you think when you give something, you're losing it, don't you? When you pay attention to somebody or give your time to somebody else, you think, I'm taking that time away from me. I'm putting all that energy into them, but that means I'm not putting enough energy into me. So I'm losing in every transaction, I'm losing. But he says in that poem, in that statement, he says, no, by giving you get. Now you don't give to get. If you give to get, then that's just a calculation. You got these people in business, they have a saying about it. They say, he does well by doing good. In other words, the do-gooders know that if they give, then they'll get back. So they keep doing good. And then, a lot of the gurus are like that. They say they're going to save the world. And then you believe they can save the world, so you start giving to them. You start supporting them. You know that one? We're saving the world. And so please give to me because I'm taking that money and saving the world. That's what I say. And you don't know whether I'm actually sticking it in a bank account somewhere, whether I'm actually putting it back into the Vedanta, do you? Really? So, but you know in yourself whether you're doing this, don't you? You know personally whether you actually do care about the other more than you care about yourself. Understand? And speaking as a jivas, we're speaking as a person. That's a cultivated person. Cultivated means that's a refined person. I was very fortunate in this birth because I had very cultivated, refined parents. We used to go to church every Sunday, and after church service, they had a potluck. You know potluck? Potluck's where everybody brings food. All the ladies during the week cook some nice food, and then they bring it to church on Sunday, and they put it in the dining hall. And then they have the service, and then after the service, they lay all the food out. It's a big, beautiful food, desserts and salads and everything is there. They say a prayer, and then everybody's standing around waiting till the prayer's over. And then there's that big pile of food, and they're hungry, you know, bless the potatoes, bless the meat, kiss the cook, and let's eat, you know. Everybody's eager, and they all rush, because they've got, oh, I want that piece of chicken on the top. They all rush at it, just like dogs who are like hungry, trying to and stack their plates up full of stuff. And my parents would hold us back. My father would just grab us because we wanted to go too. And he says, you just wait until everybody else is served and you get what's left over. In other words, the needs of the Lord come first. What? You're a servant here. The sign of your self-realization is that you can wait to get what you want. It's not saying you shouldn't want stuff or you're not supposed to get stuff. It means you're not greedy. And it says in the Vedas, he or she who eats the remnant of the sacrifice incurs no sin. That is, if you eat what's left over, you don't get any sin. If you rush, you don't get bad karma. In other words, you don't agitate it. But if you what? If you just rush there to grab it right away, that is sin. That's saying I'm a self-centered, needy person. I don't consider my environment. I don't take care of the Lord first. I'm only interested in taking care of me. I mean, only you know whether that's true for you. You know, and you have to be honest. If you're going to grow, you have to be honest and say, yes, that is the way I am. I am pretty selfish. I am really only deep down thinking of myself. And maybe I've learned how to like make people happy so they give to me, but that's not the point. When you give, you should just give without any expectation of a result. You just give because, it feels good to give. And what comes will come, but just the joy of expressing yourself, of offering yourself as a servant. He's going to say in here, you're going to see a verse, he says, the best devotees are those who serve God as an intimate servant serves its master. They're not interested in anything for themselves. The joy of making the master happy is what gives them the joy. The joy of doing the right thing is more important than getting any object. You see that in the story of Ram in the Puranas. Because Ram has the most unfortunate life. Yet Ram is always cheerful. He's always cheerful. He never gets upset or angry and so forth and so on. Because he takes his joy from following Dharma. He doesn't care if it costs him personally, one way or the other. And it does. It costs him his wife. It costs him his kingdom. It costs him all this stuff. Sends him to war. It's just, but he always does the right thing according to the circumstances. Because he knows that the circumstances are God, are Ishwara, and that he's here as a servant of God. And that by what? By thinking of himself, he's cheating himself. Just that. When you think, how are you cheating yourself? You're stunting and inhibiting your growth. And as soon as your growth stops, you don't feel good. As soon as you stop growing, it's like a flower. As soon as you have to come to your full glory here. If you don't, if you inhibit your growth, if you don't feed yourself properly, by serving the world,